Armenian National Committee, Central California, I want to welcome all of you here, members of the community, members of the media. I know that this was sort of a last minute thing, so we appreciate you taking the time to be here today. I want to acknowledge Sue Garabedian, who's in the audience today, representing County Board of Supervisors, Debbie Puchigian today. Thank you, Sue, for being here. At this time, I'm going to ask Nishan Solomonian to sort of lay out for us where Kesab, which is the town we're going to talk about today, is situated in Syria, and to talk about his experiences in that town so that we sort of have a context of what we're talking about. Nishan is a longtime Fresno resident, and he was actually born in Kesab, so he actually about the town.
Anyway, thank you for all coming. I'm going to talk very briefly about Kesab, Syria. Kesab, that I was born in, is located, it's a resort town located northwest of country of Syria, right on the Mediterranean Sea. I think the history of Kesab is about 700 or 800 years. Our ancestors came from Western Armenia, which is Eastern Turkey right now. We are very small, but all Christian Armenians lived in Syria, surrounded by neighboring country, which is Turkey, all around us. And we've been paying the price many years because being a Christian and being being a Christian or Armenian, either way. So this is I'm going to talk about the Turks that they tried to destroy us last 3 times. This is the 3rd time. Before that, 1909, they came and looted and destroyed our properties. They killed us. They burned the houses, the churches. And 1914, like the world knows that the massacre came, and we paid the price again, and we were displaced many parts of the country, and we were destroyed and killed. 50% of the Armenians, I think, Kesatis died, and then we came back, and now is the 3rd time. Like we know, a week ago or so, the Turkish government allowed the Al-Qaeda fighters, rebels, to go through their country, to their borders, to the Kesab, Syria, and cause chaos and try to do as much damage as they could to our Armenian people. I mean, this is a fact because that only Turkish government allowed them to go to their borders. They gave them security by air, by the ground. They hit our Syrian tanks and also shot a plane, Syrian plane, so they could have easy access to Kesab. Basically, if I miss anybody, there's a lot of Kesabtis here. They could, if they know anything better, or they're welcome to come and say anything they want. But that's basically, this is it, and I'm going to take Rahad to take over and describe all the circumstances going on right now in Kesab, Syria.
So we'll just read our prepared statement, and then if there are any questions, we can certainly address them then. Last Friday, the town of Kesab, located in the northwestern Syrian border, shared with the Republic of Turkey, was brutally attacked by Al-Qaeda-linked extremist fighters, with the blessing and full military and logistical support of the Turkish government. Before sunrise, its predominantly Christian Armenian inhabitants woke up to the horror of shower of missiles and rockets falling on their town. Soon the town was overrun by Al-Qaeda-linked militants, forcing most of the residents to seek refuge in other nearby towns to escape death and destruction. The following is a quote from a Wall Street Journal article published on March 26th of this year. For the Armenian Syrians from the town of Kesab and Latakia, which rebels overran this weekend, the Turkish involvement reminded them of a dark chapter in their history, the Armenian genocide perpetrated by the Ottoman Empire in 1915. Armenian Americans in the Central Valley, many of whom have familial ties in Kesab, call on all citizens of good conscience, organizations, and elected officials to demand that our President and Secretary of State, in no uncertain terms, apply diplomatic and political pressure on our so-called NATO ally Turkey to immediately cease support for the cross-border terror attacks on the Syrian Christian minority. We can no longer ignore the countless pleas by many religious and ethnic minorities in Syria who have for the past 3 years called on the US and its allies to stop supporting the rebels fighting in Syria, many of whom, according to the US government, have links to terrorist organizations. Thank you. All right, so at this time, I mean, if the members of the media have any questions, we will try to address them as best as we can, or we can, if you'd like to interview, either Nishan or myself will certainly do that as well. Yes?
How about the casualties? Are there estimates on the casualties at this point, or is it too soon?
As far as we know, officially, the casualties are in the low hundreds, but most of the town has been displaced. I mean, there's none of the original inhabitants are in the town anymore because it's occupied by basically terrorist rebels, and they've desecrated all the Christian churches and the homes of the people who used to live there. So that's as far as information that I have. Yes, Brian.
It's our understanding from the various sources we've looked at that there is definite Turkish involvement in the Catholic Church. There were Turkish fighters mixed in with Al-Qaeda and along with the other mercenaries.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think the Turkish government's even attempting to make a secret of supporting these rebels. I mean, they've openly supported the rebels and they've given them military cover. Matter of fact, the very same day, I think, it was the very same day, the Turkish military shot down a Syrian warplane in the same area. So we know that the Turkish military's hand is definitely involved. And the irony of this whole thing is, you know, there was some leaked tapes that came out just yesterday that the Turkish foreign minister, along with some of their senior members of their cabinet, were discussing on what type of pretext they can use to attack the very same rebels that they're supporting inside Syria. Because what's happened is they've sort of created a monster, you know, in supporting these rebels. Now these rebels are turning on them because they see Turkey as a secular country, and their aim is to establish an Islamic or Sharia type of government there. So the Turks, you know, if they keep supporting these groups, they're gonna, you know, as soon as they're done what they're doing in Syria, I mean, they're gonna turn on them. It's obvious, but it's no secret that they are giving them support thus far.
What was the population of Kesab before them leaving?
We believe there was 2,500 or 3,000 Armenians, Kesaptis in the region.
Can you talk a little bit about how the people left in the middle of the night and how they came in and had to evacuate the city? Can you talk a little bit about what's going on in Kesab and how all of a sudden these people who have lived there all of these years have had to just evacuate and now they're displaced and living in churches and whatnot? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Our understanding is that this region has been relatively quiet, you know, insulated from the larger war, but you know, all of a sudden, you know, like our statement mentioned, in the middle of the night they started getting bombarded, and I believe the Syrian army was able to get there in time to kind of warn them, to kind of evacuate most of the residents so that they wouldn't be ambushed and killed, because we know, I mean, everybody has seen the videos of what these rebels are capable of doing, and you know, some of them, you know,
First thing they did, they burned the church, for example. And I mean, that's the first thing they do. And they tried to cause as much chaos as they could, so they can rule by fear, basically. And my concern is actually, where is the Christian world community? They were silenced once in 1909, they were silenced 1915, now they were silenced again. If you do something otherwise to the Muslim, then the whole world, like we're burning the Quran, the world knew about it, but where are the Christians now?
Can you
There's
talk?
no Christian, believe it or not. There's no Christian in this planet at all. Thanks Lord, in all the churches you can see everybody say praise Lord, but when they come a true life, there's no Christian. Yeah, with Saudi Arabia and the other stupid countries
Rosie, go ahead.
against us.
I wanted to add something. My name is Rosie Bedrosian. I'm on the Central Executive Board of the Armenian Relief Society. And this past weekend, during our plenary meeting, we were shocked by the information that reached us beginning midnight Friday in Syria, when all these terrible atrocities started. We received firsthand information minute by minute. As it was, Kesab, with a population of close to 3,000 people, on top of that was already helping to harbor a safe place for the Armenians, about 150 families that had fled from Aleppo, who were already living in Kesab under conditions that were provided to them by the Armenians in Kesab. As we all know and we heard, Kesab was historically Armenian over 10 centuries. It's been an Armenian enclave. It was one of our pieces of property that was lost during the 1915 genocide and prior. And what happened was that as much as the Armenians were caught off guard, these undertakings have been taking place for the past 9 months to 1 year. And the Armenians of Kesab have been noticing that different things were happening, that surveillance cameras were being put up surrounding the city, roads were being monitored, and they had a feeling that something was going to happen. And unfortunately, our ally, Turkey, was in on the whole operation from the start, waiting for the weak point of Syria and for the Syrian army to be out of the area. The Turkish government themselves provided army trucks, and these were eyewitness accounts, army trucks that brought in mercenaries in the middle of the night, armed and dangerous, with knives, with rifles, with machine guns, shouting, Allah Akbar, to all the residents and waking them up in the middle of the morning. And these people had to flee in the middle of the night by foot, by car, by bicycle, by whatever transportation they could have. And in 2 hours they were taken away to Latakia. Unfortunately and fortunately, at one point, approximately 40 of the younger men decided to stay behind in the area and to guard the city. Those men were also ambushed and barely fled with their lives. But in the same time, a lot of the elderly and those who were mentally challenged were unable to leave the city and were surrounded and left captive in their own city. And some of the very elderly that had lived there through generations didn't want to abandon and leave their homes, and they stayed behind. The reports that we are getting are devastating. They are just, it's inhumane. The Armenian Relief Society, right at the beginning, was in touch with the United Nations, to Geneva, to Mr. Simonovic, who is the head of the Human Rights Committee. We have a member on the committee, and they were all put aware, but nothing was done. Nothing was urgent. So now we're here to put out a plea to Armenian and not Armenian alike, to all the media, to please take notice of what is happening in Kesab. The genocide is continuing. People are being killed, people are being decapitated, massacred, and displaced. They fled to Latakia, which is right on the sea and the Mediterranean Sea. And what we've heard, unfortunately, is that the Turkish army is not stopping in Kesap. They are going to try and march into Latakia and take whatever they can in Latakia. So this has to stop immediately because a whole portion of the nation is being tortured, murdered, displaced, and driven out of their native Armenian homeland, which was in a refuge place in Syria. Kesab was Armenian land. It was Armenian land for hundreds of years. It was part of Greater Cilicia. It was part of our Cilician Armenian kingdom, and we don't want to lose it. The Kesapsis are one of our major branches of the Armenians that are still around nowadays. We don't want it to become Assyria. We don't want them to lose their land. And it's important that the world take notice of such an atrocity that's taking place right under the nose of the NATO, of the UN, and of the world.
Thank you.
Yes?
Do you know how many Armenians in Fresno have family currently that had to flee, and if they've been able to get in contact with them, wherever they are now?
We have a good, a lot of Kesaptis, which is Kesapti mean people from Kesap in this valley, and we all have relations there. Matter of fact, I do myself probably 4 or 5 cousins and their families, so maybe 50 of them alone. And subdivision family, they have some. There is a lot of people here in Fresno right now, they have families still there. Yes, they do.
Have you been able to get in touch with
Yes, I spoke to one of my cousins. He's in neighboring Lebanon in Anjar right now, and some of them is in the rescue in the churches and here and there. They're displaced until now, so they're trying to find places to stay here.
going forward, any plans for them?
Well, there is uncertainty right now. We're trying to help ourselves as much as we can. Yes.
I have heard that they have started attacking the border of Lebanon, and the Lebanese soldiers have captured at least 15 at a time of these terrorists. Every day when I check my Facebook, I hear the atrocities, I hear what's going on, and they're fearing that Lebanon is going to be the next target. So when is our nation here that we live under and we pay taxes to, when are they going to wake up and do something about it?
Well, I must know much about that, but I don't.
Well, there is, that's a political decision that our leaders have to make. That's why we're kind of having this discussion today, and we want to keep up the pressure. And it's, that goes back to the importance of, us as citizens being engaged in the political discourse, the process. And, when you get those ANC alerts and people asking you to take a second and send an email to your representative, to your senator, it's important to do that, because that's how, if we don't speak up, no one's going to listen. So, this is not just a Fresno effort. This is a, statewide, nationwide, even worldwide effort to bring attention to this. Everybody, there's nobody in this world that's not aware of what's going on over there in Syria. So for political considerations, though, some of the people that should be speaking out about it, or governments that have turned a blind eye to this issue. And again, if we don't turn up the heat, they'll just, there are a lot of interests involved here, and we have to scream the loudest and hope that our politicians, our leaders take note and do what's right. And we know the right thing to do here is to call on Turkey to stop supporting, and call on Saudi Arabia and some of our other allies who are on the forefront of funding these terrorists. So it's a very sensitive and complicated issue. It's just like going back to the issue of the Armenian genocide. We know it's happened. There's no question about it. But why won't our government, acknowledge it? Because they keep going back to the same thesis that, well, it's not politically expedient at this time. there's always an excuse. Everybody knows that there's always an excuse why it's politically inexpedient. That's why it's, like I said, it's important for us to be politically strong and active, and that's how you bring about change and bring about pressure on our elected officials.
It's sad that the media is very quiet. I listen to the news, whether it's national or local or anything, and we hear nothing. 7 days this is going on, and not a word about what's happening there. And yet, if the Syrian government had attacked a few rebel areas, it would have been all over the news. And here, a peaceful town is attacked by Turkey, and they can't say they were not involved because some of the Kesapsis, the eyewitness people are saying that those people are speaking Turkish. The Arabs don't speak Turkish. They're speaking Turkish, which is a good evidence that Turkey is deliberately involved. I was reading the Turkish news in Turkish, and where they are saying that, waving their arms, they're crossing the border, and they're entering Kesap. Turkey is allowing all this. As Rosa said, truckloads are being brought by those extremist Chechens and Azeris.
You're absolutely right.
Why is it silent? Why is Armenia silent? Is the State Department controlling Armenia?
That's going to be the State Department.
4,000 rebels entered from Turkey, 4,000. And none of those 4,000 spoke any Arabic. None of those spoke any Arabic. All of them were different, they were from different countries. I don't know where from, Chechnya, Afghanistan, Pakistan, whatever.
Tajikistan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all the...
Okay, so going back to the media question, well, the mainstream media we know is, I'll get to you in 1 second, is pretty much corporate controlled, and they have a line that they toe. I mean, it's usually that if you read most of the major newspapers and news outlets, you see that they're all on the same theme. They're against the Syrian regime, and that's what they're going to talk about. And the rest doesn't really matter. However, I was pleasantly surprised to see, like I mentioned, the Wall Street Journal and some of the BBC and some of the other major news organizations did run a story about the plighted Armenians in Kesab, albeit again, it goes back to the same thing. Their thesis is that they support the rebels, and that's just the way it is. I mean, there's not much, unfortunately, that we can do about that.
To answer some of the questions to what some of the people have, I actually have family in Kesab, and I have spoken with them. My grandmother's brother, who is 88 years old, still lives in Kesab. I spoke with him. He is in Latakia, living inside of...
Because right now in Syria, what guarantee is there that it won't be in Lebanon and Jordan with all the Christians?
They're training the terrorists in Jordan already. Yeah. We gave $1 billion to Jordan. Mr. Obama did last week.
What is your goal? Are you guys having, I see it says there's a fund. Have you set up a fund, and if so, where's that money going to, and how can people donate?
Well, Rafi, Rafi is the one organizing the fundraising. Rafi, please come and discuss that with you.
Fundraising efforts have been taking place since the very first day. We do request that anybody who would care to help the victims of Kesab and what's going on there, please, if you're going to make a check, make the check out to the Syrian Armenian Relief Fund. They are the ones who are in charge of that. You can contact us here at the community center, or you can send it to our P.O. Box. It's P.O. Box 626, and the zip code is 93729. So we urge everyone, it doesn't matter, anything helps right now. So we're going to be continuously trying to collect money on a consistent basis, and hope that you guys can all partake in that. Again, but please make the checks out to the Syrian Armenian Relief Fund. And P.O. Box 626, Fresno, California, 93729.
The mercenaries ran in, yelling and screaming Allah Akbar in the name of Allah for all these people to abandon their homes and to just get out of town, basically. It was an ambush that they were surprised to have had. They were woken up in the middle of the night. People escaped without anything, with just the clothes on their backs. They left their documents there, all their belongings, and they fled on foot to safety to the Mediterranean Sea, to the city of Latakia.
What role is religion playing?
Religion plays a very big role. The people of the village are Christian Armenian. Those who have attacked the village are the Muslims that are being sent over by Turkey.